My name is Sean Rafter, and today I'm here to present my research project, The Effect of Protest on Social Movements. How many of you, upon seeing a protest of any size, from a few people standing on a street corner waving signs, to millions of people marching down the street in unison, waving flags and chanting, once you remove your personal feelings about the subject matter or about this as a form of expression, how many of you wonder like I do, does protest work? This presentation will show that in fact it does work, and that it positively contributes to the legislative success of social movements by raising the public awareness and thereby the awareness of elected officials responsible for enacting legislation. Simply put, protest equals public awareness, and public awareness equals legislation. Let's start with public opinion. In order to determine whether protest is successful at raising the public awareness, we must first define success. So let's ask the question, what does protest aim to achieve? There are two main goals of protest: increasing the visibility of the cause and demonstrating the power of the protesting group. Now let's take a look at some examples of these goals being achieved. First, take a look at this Los Angeles Times article. This is an article about protest in Sacramento against the reduction in budget funds for HIV and AIDS education, prevention, and treatment programs. What this article is really about is a line item in a budget. And not even an actual budget, a proposed budget. Again, putting your personal feelings aside about a topic like this, does any item in any proposed budget get this kind of media attention if it is not accompanied by protest? The Los Angeles Times is a major news publication. I think it's safe to say that protests enhance the visibility of this cause. Now let's look at the 2006 protests of immigration reform bills. In May of 2006, the House of Representatives passed H.R. 4437, which called for the deportation of millions of immigrants along with punishment for those who helped them. The response to this legislation was nationwide. From Los Angeles, California, to Chicago, Illinois, Denver, Colorado, Phoenix, Arizona, even Jackson, Mississippi, millions of people took to the streets in protest of this bill. Businesses were literally shut down, both from the size of the demonstration and from a lack of employees showing up for work. Needless to say, this bill fell apart in committee. And the power that this demonstration showed definitely played a large part in that happening. There are a couple relevant studies on the subject as well. Rory McVeigh and Christian Smith are two sociology professors who published a paper in the Sociological Forum in 1999. They performed multinomial logistic regressions on a cross-section of America to find identifying characteristics of protesters. What they found is that protest participants are similar to those who participate in institutionalized politics. This is significant because if a large demonstration invites just a single person to take a second look at an issue, more in depth than they had in the past, it can possibly gain an ally to fight this cause in the future. The second study was actually some primary research that I conducted. I distributed a survey to a random sample of 100 people. The results of the survey are shown on this graph. Over 75% of the respondents across every category, gender, age, education level, and political affiliation, responded with a yes when asked, has your knowledge or awareness of any cause been positively affected by seeing a protest about that cause? This is additional evidence that protest raises public awareness. So now that we have seen that public awareness is impacted by protest, let's move to the second part of the equation or thesis I presented earlier. Does public opinion impact policy and legislation? Politicians are always concerned with re-election and are compelled to vote with the policy wishes of the public. Regardless of the reason they got into politics, their livelihood depends on the support of their constituency, and therefore to ignore them would be counterproductive. Politicians do not always act as a result of viewing demonstrations, but they definitely notice them, the same as the public does. According to the study by a researcher named Joseph Agnon, public opinion actually influences policy above and beyond its independent impact when accompanied by protest. Agnon analyzed time series data from 1960 through 1998 and tested multiple hypotheses concerning the interaction between public opinion, protest, and public policy. He found there exists evidence of an amplification model, whereas public opinion alone affects policy, and that the effects are actually magnified when accompanied by protest that raises the attention of the issue to decision makers. Another good example is the anti-war demonstrations in the early 1970s, like rallying against the Vietnam War. According to political science professor Joel Lefkowitz in his 2005 article in New Political Science titled Movement Outcomes and Movement Declines, he pointed out that the anti-war movement changed the discourse and the conduct of the war. He notes that the language in the Paris Peace Accords mirrors the stated goals of the movement, and the impact didn't end there. Changes in the voting age and in the presidential nominating system can also be traced to anti-Vietnam War movement. So this concludes my presentation. You have seen how protest positively contributes to the legislative success of social movements by raising public awareness and thereby the attention of elected officials responsible for enacting legislation. Now I'd like to open the floor to any questions you may have.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned 2 examples of studies on the subject of protest. Is there one particularly groundbreaking study on the topic?
That's a good question. I would have to say in my research, the most often cited work was William Ganson's Strategy of Social Protest. It's widely considered to be the most comprehensive study on the subject, and it looks at the characteristics of successful protest groups. There were entire studies done critiquing his work, and there are many others in support of it. Then there were analyses of those studies and different studies that use the same data set in order to come to different conclusions. I would have to say that that is the defining work on the subject of protest. Any other questions?
Mr. Rafter, I have one more question.
Yes.
Protest is a complicated and complex issue that involves and is affected by several different issues. Was your research affected by the complexities of the issue?
Yes, it definitely was. For exactly the reason you stated, it's difficult to find articles that were conclusive. Most contain disclaimers regarding the need for further study or the complexity of the number of variables involved. There is definitely a future for additional studies on this topic. That will conclude my presentation. Thank you for your time.